I used to believe the worst pain a parent could feel was losing a child. That was before I found out my son hadn't died at all. He had chosen to disappear. The day I learned he was alive, hiding behind a new name, and a trail of debts under mine. If you've ever faced a betrayal that rewrote everything you thought you knew, tell me your story in the comments. The call reached me on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was finishing a maintenance report at the energy company's office. A man from the U.S. consulate in Panama read my son's name, stated the cause of death, and confirmed they were handling local procedures. No pause, no kindness, just a line read from a script. The phone went still before I could ask a single question. Telling my daughter Allison felt harder than hearing the news. Her voice dropped as soon as she sensed something was wrong. "Dad, what happened?" It's Dylan slipped out before I knew how to soften it. She asked for details. None existed. Those next hours moved in straight lines. I called the funeral home, signed forms, listened to instructions. People spoke, and I answered, but nothing settled. Grief didn't crash over me the way movies suggest. It simply hollowed the space where decisions had to be made. By evening, arrangements were set for a closed casket service at a small church in Aurora. The consulate claimed they couldn't ship the remains. That was all they said. The service came 3 days later. Family friends stood in 2 short rows, exchanging awkward nods because no one knew how to speak about a son who died in another country doing who knows what. Allison stayed close. She kept touching my arm as people approached with condolences. The pastor read a short passage. The casket stayed sealed. I focused on the grain of the wood to ground myself, counting the lines, as if that would hold me together long enough to get through the day. For the rest of the week, phone calls tapered off. People returned to their routines. I tried doing the same. Work helped. Checking equipment logs kept my mind occupied. The desk felt stable compared to everything else. 10 days after the funeral, a white envelope from Wells Fargo arrived at my townhouse in Aurora. The return address belonged to the downtown branch. Nothing about it looked urgent, yet something about the timing felt wrong. The letter explained my status as a secondary holder of a safe deposit box Dylan had kept for 8 years. They required my presence to review its contents due to changes in account status. The phrasing tightened something in my chest. The banker led me to a small room and placed the box on the table. No commentary, just a polite gesture for me to open it. Papers filled the space, legal documents, loan forms, contracts with unfamiliar company names. Then my own name appeared across multiple pages. Loan agreements totaling $1.2 million, signatures that almost matched mine. A handful of IDs followed each, carrying Dylan's face under a different name, and tucked between them a short letter that made even less sense than the rest. His handwriting wandered across the page, mixing apologies with unfinished explanations. The tone didn't match a man facing death. It didn't match anything I'd ever known about my son. The banker asked if I needed a moment. I folded the letter, gathered the documents, and said I'd be in touch. Nothing more. Walking back through the lobby, each step felt strangely steady, as if my body understood something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The documents from the safe deposit box stayed in a folder on the passenger seat as I drove toward Capitol Hill. Traffic moved slowly enough that the loan forms and forged signatures kept pulling my attention. Nothing about them felt accidental. Whatever Dylan had built in Panama, he'd done it with my name, stamped across every corner. The law office sat in an older brick building near the district courts. A receptionist led me straight to Mark Feldman's office. He'd handled a property dispute for me years earlier and had a habit of speaking bluntly, no matter the situation. Mark skimmed each page without a break. His jaw tightened first, then his voice followed. "None of these signatures are yours," he said. They look close, I answered. Close doesn't matter. They're still fake. But lenders won't care until a formal dispute is filed. Right now, that debt hangs over your head. Hearing that pushed something heavy through my chest. Mark kept talking, laying out timelines, filings, and the steps needed to contest forged agreements. He tapped a line on one of the forms. See this. Whoever created these documents knew how to mimic your writing. Not an amateur. He used my name like a shield slipped out of me before I could filter it. Mark didn't disagree. The phone in my pocket buzzed. Wells Fargo again. Mark gestured for me to take it, so I stepped into the hallway. A representative spoke fast, insisting the bank required immediate clarification about several wire transfers tied to the loan. When I explained the signatures were forged, she repeated policy language that felt cold enough to sting. We'll need further proof, Mr. Hale. If you can't provide it, the bank may begin recovery actions. I exhaled through my teeth. I'll bring whatever you need. Please do so promptly. The call barely ended when another name flashed across the screen, Marisol Green. Her voice carried a pace that suggested she'd already heard pieces of the story. Richard Allison told me something happened with Dylan, she said. There's a lot I don't understand, I answered. Then meet me. I'm near I-25, Jensen's Diner. You're close enough, come now. It wasn't framed as a suggestion. I drove there without arguing. Marisol waited in a booth near the back, flipping through a notebook full of scribbles. She rose as soon as I approached. Let me see the papers, she said. No, Marisol. I don't need more opinions. I just need this to end. You think signing forms and hoping people forget will make this disappear? Sit. Her bluntness had always grated, but it kept me grounded. The folder slid across the table. She opened it and moved through each sheet quickly. Look at this, she said, pointing at a property agreement. This land sits near a development under federal review. Last month they started investigating fraud linked to that region. So Dylan mixed himself in something criminal. She nodded slowly. He wasn't just hiding debt. He was involved in deals with people who cut corners for profit. A waitress placed 2 glasses of water on the table. Neither of us touched them. Marisol pulled another form from the pile. You see the dates, he kept this going long after his accident. If he knew he was sinking, he built an escape route. Enough, I muttered. He's gone. I already buried him. Richard, you buried a box, nothing else. Hearing that forced me to look away. Part of me wanted to stand up, walk out, and shut down the entire conversation. Let the debt suffocate me if it had to. At least that path didn't require looking at whatever Dylan had become. Marisol didn't let the moment drift. You're not doing this for revenge, she said. You're doing it because your name is all over these records. If you walk away, you let strangers define your future. Another call came through, rattling the phone on the table. Wells Fargo again. Marisol stared at me until I answered. The same representative from earlier spoke in a rehearsed tone. Mr. Hale, our team needs you to visit the branch. Your presence is required to verify documents connected to the outstanding balance. I gripped the bridge of my nose. When, as soon as possible. Today, if you can. Marisol watched every word. The call ended. She leaned in, her voice lowering but losing none of its force. You see, they won't stop. Not until you face this. I gathered the papers back into the folder. My hands steadied even though my thoughts didn't. I don't know if I can take more, I said. You can, she replied. You just haven't realized how far this already reaches. A group of travelers walked past our booth, laughing about something light. Their world looked simple from where I sat. Mine had turned into a maze built from my son's choices. Marisol pushed her notebook aside. Let me help. I'll start reviewing these documents in detail, but you need to meet that bank rep. Don't delay. Her tone cut through the weight, pressing on me. Without arguing, I nodded and stood. She followed me out to the parking lot. "Call me when you're done," she said. "Even if nothing changes." "That's unlikely," drifted out before I reached the driver's door. The downtown branch manager met me in a conference room with a thick file already waiting on the table. He greeted me with a practiced nod, then opened the folder, as if preparing for a deposition. "Mr. Hale, thank you for coming in. We reviewed the documents you submitted. There are additional transactions you should be aware of." He slid several pages toward me. Wire transfers, withdrawals, invoices, each one bearing my name. The amounts varied, but every number felt like a weight placed on my shoulders. "These transfers went to accounts connected to residential projects in Coronado, Panama," he continued. "Some were authorized in person. That's why we need clarification." My thumb pressed against the edge of the page. "I never visited those offices," I said. "That's why this next part matters." He pulled up a monitor, entered a code, and opened a verification log. A still image appeared, a man signing a form in a small office, captured by a basic security camera. The resolution wasn't great yet. The outline of the face was unmistakable. The build, the posture, even the slight downturn at the corner of the mouth. It was Dylan. The manager spoke carefully, as though measuring each word. "This was recorded 4 months ago. The signer used your information. Our system flagged a discrepancy, but the transaction was cleared due to a matching photo ID." He tapped a second file. "The ID carried your name." My stomach tightened. Logic tried to step in. Maybe someone resembled him. Maybe this was a coincidence, but the image crushed every theory. That was my son, alive, healthy enough to forge a signature, and confident enough to stand in front of a camera. The manager watched my reaction with a cautious expression. "We understand this is difficult, but the bank must move forward with its review. If you intend to claim fraud, you'll need to file immediately. Otherwise, recovery steps may begin." "I'll get you what you need," I said. The words felt thin but steady. He excused himself, leaving me alone with the file. I closed it, walked out, and forced my legs to carry me back across the lobby. Thoughts scattered in every direction, but refused to settle. The phone vibrated as soon as I reached the parking structure. Marisol's name flashed across the screen. She picked up on the first ring. "Tell me what happened." "He's alive." She didn't respond at once. When she finally spoke, her tone held more certainty than shock. "Send me the photo." After the image reached her, silence stretched long enough that I leaned against the car for balance. "This matches what I suspected," she finally said. "Look at the background. That office belongs to a registry used by people maintaining multiple identities. Dylan paid renewal fees for those documents. You're sure I know someone in Panama who checks those logs? Let me call him." The click at the end of the line left me alone with the echo of her words. The folder sat on the passenger seat again, but now it felt heavier, as if it belonged to someone else. Betrayal had a way of changing weight depending on how much truth slipped out. Marisol called back 5 minutes later. My contact confirmed something. Dylan used the name Ryan Pierce at a coastal community near Coronado. He didn't vanish. He built a life. A bitter taste climbed up my throat. Why would he choose that place? It's full of Americans trying to reinvent themselves. No one asks questions. Traffic on the ramp began to move, so I merged and let the car drift toward Aurora. Every mile asked the same question: how long had Dylan been planning this? Marisol broke the silence again. "Richard, you need to understand how deep this goes. People who run from debt don't typically fake their death unless they're trying to escape everything. And he used me to do it," I said. "He used your name, your reputation, and your trust. Those aren't small things." A message alert interrupted us. Wells Fargo again. "We're preparing to initiate recovery actions. Please visit the branch to address your outstanding obligations promptly." The word obligations hit harder than the rest. It sounded final, like the door behind me had locked. Marisol exhaled. They're not waiting. They'll take your house if you don't act. I know. You sound worn down. I'm tired of chasing shadows. Then stop chasing. Go see the man who created them. Her words hung between us. She wasn't pushing revenge. She was pushing clarity. If Dylan had truly rebuilt himself under a new identity, then hiding behind lawyers and disputes wouldn't solve anything. After the call ended, I pulled into a rest stop along the highway. The sun sat low enough that cars cast long streaks along the pavement. A couple of truckers leaned against their rigs, talking about weekend plans, their lives unscarred by the kind of choices my son had made. I called Allison. She answered on the third ring. Dad, everything okay? No. I need to tell you something. She kept the line open as I explained the photo, the transactions, the false identity. All of it. Her breathing shifted from shock to disappointment. So he lied, she said. Yes, he didn't just lie. He dragged us back into the same mess he always creates. The words hit harder than she intended, but she wasn't wrong. We'll get through it, I told her. Are you sure I'm trying? She paused. When she spoke again, her tone softened. I don't want you carrying all of this alone. Promise me you won't keep anything from me. I won't. After the call, the highway hummed with steady movement. Trucks rolled by. Families in SUVs passed with snacks and weekend bags piled in the back. Life continued even while mine felt paused. Booking tickets to Panama felt less like a choice and more like following a line someone else had drawn. Marisol handled most of the arrangements without asking for permission. We met at Denver International with small bags and no talk of how long we'd stay. She moved with a sense of purpose. I moved because stopping meant surrendering to a mess built under my name. The flight to Tucumán passed without conversation. She reviewed notes on her tablet while I stared at a page of transactions Dylan had authorized. Every number carried his handwriting in one way or another. The silence between us wasn't unfriendly. It simply reflected the truth we were heading toward, something neither of us could soften. Customs took time, but soon we were stepping into the humid air outside the terminal. Marisol waved down a driver she had arranged through a friend. The man greeted her with familiarity and helped load our bags. Once the doors shut, she pointed toward the highway, stretching towards the coast. Coronado's about an hour, she said. A lot of Americans live there. You'll see. The landscape shifted as we moved farther from the city. Construction zones, small markets, and gated communities passed by. Groups of retired expats gathered near roadside cafes, chatting with locals, living in their own pockets of comfort, far from the lives they'd left behind. A strange mix of hope and resentment stirred in me. Hope that Dylan might be here. Resentment that he might be hiding among people who came to reinvent themselves for reasons far less destructive. The driver dropped us in front of a modest hotel near a cluster of long-term rental buildings. A hand-painted sign welcomed foreign residents as if they were regular guests. The owner stepped out from the lobby when he saw us approach. Marisol spoke first. We're looking for someone who may have stayed here under the name Ryan Pierce. The man adjusted his glasses, searching his memory. One moment he said disappearing to check a worn ledger. He returned with a small nod. A guest matching that name stayed here a few months ago. Taller man, brown hair, American. Left without notice. The description matched Dylan too closely to ignore. We checked into separate rooms, dropped our bags, and met again in the small courtyard. Marisol spread her notes across a bench. We need to split up. You handle the shops where he used card payments. I'll talk to the businesses tied to foreign residents. People always remember faces in towns like this. Agreeing felt natural. The work didn't require emotion, just movement. The next few hours blended into a steady pattern of questions and short conversations. Clerks recognized the name Pierce. Some recalled a man who came in for groceries, drinks, or internet top-ups. None knew where he was now. The routine carried a numbing efficiency walk in ask, compare details, move on. By late afternoon, heat pressed down hard enough that I stepped into a shaded corner outside a pharmacy to recheck a stack of receipts the bank had forwarded to me. Each one confirmed his presence here. Card swipes from beach shops, a repair stand, a small supermarket. All recent. A message buzzed from Marisol. Found someone. Meet me at the hotel. She waited near the steps, tapping her pen against her notebook. There's a bartender at a place down the coast. He says a man using that alias visits on weekends. Dylan, I said. The name felt different now. No grief attached, just facts lining up. That's my guess, she replied. The bartender described his voice. Matches what I remember. The weight of that hit deeper than expected, like someone pulling a curtain back on a stage I never wanted to face. Marisol handed over a piece of paper with the bar's location. He should be there tonight. If not, he'll show soon. We'll watch from a distance first. She hesitated before adding, You ready for this? No, came out without hesitation. But it doesn't matter. We returned to our rooms to gather a few things. While packing the papers back into the folder, my eyes returned to the same transaction record I'd stared at during the flight. A signature forged in familiar strokes. A reminder that Dylan had planned this with precision. Stepping out again, I caught Marisol waiting near the gate. Let's go, she said. The walk toward the beach road carried a rhythm all its own. Locals gathered near rental shops. Tourists wandered near food carts. Music drifted from several directions. None of it registered beyond the outline of people living their normal evenings. As we neared the shoreline, Marisol paused. The bar's a few minutes that way. I'll stay back and watch the entrance. You go when you're ready. Ready isn't the word, I muttered. She didn't push further. Sand shifted under my shoes as I stepped toward the beach. The sound of the surf grew louder, though the water itself remained a blur beyond the row of umbrellas left by day travelers. The bar sat ahead, built with wooden beams and open seating filled with weekend guests. People laughed, talked, ordered drinks. A normal night for them. For me, every step tightened a knot that had been forming since the consulate first mentioned Dylan's name. I adjusted the strap of the folder tucked under my arm and kept moving. The entrance stood directly ahead, crowded, but easy enough to slip through. The breeze carried faint scents from the grill, mixing with the sound of conversations that rose and fell without pattern. My foot hit the first wooden plank of the walkway leading into the bar. I held onto the rail for a second, not to steady myself, but to take one last breath before crossing into whatever waited beyond those tables. Then I walked forward. The bar buzzed with weekend energy voices rising and fading chairs scraping a bartender shouting drink orders. People blended into one another until one movement caught my attention. A familiar tilt of the head. A laugh I'd heard thousands of times when he was a boy, though deeper now worn by choices I hadn't been allowed to see. Dylan sat near the far railing with a woman young enough to be in her 20s. She leaned close while he gestured, as if life had given him every break. He looked healthy, relaxed, alive in a way that mocked every hour I'd spent planning a funeral for a son I believed gone. My feet stopped a dozen yards away. Watching him joke with her made something twist hard in my chest, not because he'd found company, but because he did it without a shadow of remorse. He wasn't hiding fear. He wasn't mourning. He was thriving. She left the table to order drinks. That was the moment I stepped forward. Dylan. His entire body jerked. The name hit him like a stone breaking glass. Conversation around us halted for a beat before resuming in uneven murmurs. His hand froze midway toward lifting a bottle. He stared at me as if confronting a ghost. He stood abruptly. "What are you doing here?" His voice cracked before he masked it with anger. "I came because you're supposed to be dead," I said. He glanced around, adjusting his tone. "Not here. Sit down, don't make a scene. You made the scene the moment you staged your death." His jaw tightened. "Lower your voice." "I'm not raising it." He motioned for me to follow him toward a side area with fewer people. I moved behind him, keeping a couple of steps of distance. He turned sharply once we reached a small alcove. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "You don't understand what happened." "Then explain why my name is on loans you opened. Why there are fake IDs with your face. Why you left your sister and me to bury a sealed coffin." He shook his head, eyes darting as though searching for sympathy in the air. "You have no idea what I was dealing with. I was trapped. People used me. I had to disappear. So you chose fraud and a fake death." It wasn't like that, he snapped. "You think I wanted this? I was drowning. Everyone expected me to fix everything. You never helped, never believed in me." The old accusation landed with familiar weight. "I believed in you more times than you earned," I replied. "And I'm still paying for it." He kicked at a loose board, frustration boiling over. "Those debts aren't my fault. I trusted the wrong partners. They blamed me when the project collapsed. I had to protect myself. So you sold my identity to cover your tracks." His face reddened. "I didn't sell anything. You don't get it. I was desperate. They would have come after me. You were better equipped to take the hit." The words struck harder than the sight of him alive. "You chose survival at my expense." Dylan stepped closer, defiance taking over. "You're making it sound worse than it is. I left you a letter." I tried to explain. That letter said nothing. It didn't match the story the consulate told. Because I couldn't write the truth. I couldn't risk it falling into the wrong hands. His explanations unraveled with every sentence. The more excuses he made, the further he drifted from the boy I used to know. Pulling my phone from my pocket felt like muscle memory. No drama, no hesitation. I hit record. "Then tell me the truth now." He noticed immediately. "What are you doing? Documenting this? For the bank? For the authorities? Whoever needs it?" Dylan's mask shattered. "You think you're going to hand me over after everything I went through? You dragged me into felony-level fraud. You didn't think about me then." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing as panic overtook anger. "Stop recording. Dad, just stop." "Tell the truth," I repeated. He swung toward me and shouted loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "You need to leave Panama. You hear me? Get out. You don't know who I've dealt with. If you stay, things will get worse for you." A few patrons rose from their seats, unsure whether to intervene. The woman he'd been sitting with lingered at a distance, confusion plain on her face. He didn't apologize. Didn't ask if we were safe. He just wanted me gone. I stopped the recording, placed the phone back in my pocket, and stepped away. He didn't follow. He turned his back and spoke to the woman, likely spinning another story to patch the hole my presence had torn open. Walking out of the bar felt harder than walking in. The noise returned behind me, but all I heard was the realization that whatever part of Dylan I'd hoped still existed had died long before the faked drowning. Marisol waited near a cluster of palm trees. She studied my face before saying anything. "You saw him?" "Yes. How did he react, as if I ruined his vacation?" Her expression hardened. "My contact just sent more information. Dylan's been using 3 different identities in the last 2 years, each one tied to different financial activity." "That doesn't surprise me anymore." She gently touched my arm. Not comfort, just acknowledgement. "This won't end by itself." Back at the hotel, the adrenaline from confronting Dylan faded fast, leaving a dull heaviness in its place. Marisol walked beside me up the stairs, saying nothing until we reached the landing. You should send that recording to Mark and the agent now, she said, before anything interferes with it. The reminder pushed me into motion. Once in my room, the phone came out the file attached, and 2 messages went out, one to Mark Feldman in Denver, one to Agent Ramos, the FBI contact Marisol trusted. Ramos replied within minutes. Received the file. The situation involves multiple jurisdictions. If further evidence confirms identity fraud and staged death, we can pursue a formal request. Short, direct, and far more promising than I expected. Marisol knocked once and stepped into the room without waiting for a full invitation. Her expression carried a different kind of urgency. I have something, she said, handing over a printed set of documents. A friend at a local bank pulled these. The pages showed a transfer of ownership. Dylan had reassigned an entire real estate project to me months before disappearing. My signature, forged again, sat at the bottom of the contract. He dumped the fallout on you, she said. If that project collapses, and it already has, you become the responsible party. A flicker of relief worked through me, not because the news was good, but because it meant his intentions were finally clear. Evidence was stacking in a way even he couldn't talk himself out of. Ramos would have what he needed. Mark would have leverage. For the first time, something leaned in my favor. The moment didn't last. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number appeared. You think you're helping yourself. Keep pushing, and I'll release documents proving you ran those deals. People will believe it. Another message followed. I'm warning you. Stop now. A third. You don't want to know what I can do. My breath stalled. Not from fear, though there was some of that, but from the realization that Dylan hadn't reached the bottom yet. He was willing to drag me through mud he created, willing to let me take the fall if it kept him afloat a little longer. Marisol looked over my shoulder as the messages continued. Screenshot everything she said. He's threatening to frame me, I muttered. He'll try anything to survive this. You knew that the moment he told you to leave Panama. The phone buzzed again, another threat. I stopped reading halfway through. He doesn't care who gets ruined, I said softly. He never did, she replied. But this is why you can't back off now. I lowered the phone. What if he actually pulls it off? What if he convinces someone I'm part of his mess? Marisol sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped. You walk away and the bank will take your home. Your retirement will evaporate. Your name will be attached to every crime he committed. You'll lose everything anyway. So my only path is forward. It always was. Her tone didn't hold judgment, just truth. She'd seen these patterns before in other cases, and the look in her eyes told me she saw the same trajectory forming here. Ramos needs documentation of Dylan's current life, she continued. Where he stays, what he pays for who he deals with. We need a clear timeline showing he acted under aliases. That means tracking him down. Yes, she said, but not confronting him again. Not like last night. I set the phone on the table and rubbed my forehead. Rest wouldn't come, not tonight. What do you suggest? We start with his lodging. People who live under borrowed names still leave traces, rent payments, laundry services, local vendors. He'll have a routine. She pulled out her notebook and drew a small map of Coronado. My contact says he rotated between short-term rentals to stay invisible. One of them is near the market you visited. Her preparation steadied me. She had a way of stripping everything down to actions, and right now actions were easier to handle than emotions. We'll split tasks, she continued. You talk to the places that handled his payments. I'll handle the identities. This town keeps informal logs workers remember faces better than official systems do. I nodded, though exhaustion tugged at the back of my skull. The threats, I said. He's desperate. Desperation makes sloppy criminals, she answered. Use that. A ping echoed from my phone. Another message from Dylan came through longer this time, filled with frantic demands that I drop everything and return to Colorado. He insisted he'd already covered the tracks, and that any further digging would destroy both of us. Marisol read it, her brow tightening. "He's spiraling," she said. "Or calculating," I replied. She stood and gathered her things. "Get some rest. We start early. The more evidence we have, the faster Ramos can involve the authorities." Rest wasn't likely, but lying down helped me think. My eyes drifted toward the ceiling as the phone lay beside me. Screen dark. Dylan had once asked for help the way children ask for a ladder to climb down from a tree, scared but reachable. Now he sent threats trying to claw his way over anyone near him. Marisol's voice from earlier echoed in my mind. "You just haven't realized how far this already reaches." My hand found the phone again. The screenshot icon flashed several times as I documented each threat, each timestamp, each chain of messages. After sending them to Mark and Ramos, the device hummed again, with a simple confirmation from both men. "Got them. Keep collecting." I placed the phone face down, pushed myself upright, and reached for the folder of documents. The plan would need structure. Times, places, witness names, anything that tied Dylan to his aliases. Marisol spent the early morning on the phone, with her contact trading names of guest houses and rental managers who might have seen Dylan in the last week. I added details when she signaled dates, addresses, the false identities he had used. Once everything lined up, she forwarded the location data to Agent Ramos in Panama City. Ramos called shortly after. "We've received your information. Stay available." "Do not approach the subject again," Marisol answered for both of us. "We won't." The day moved slowly as we packed our things and settled the bill at the small hotel. I kept waiting for another threat from Dylan, another barrage of texts, but the phone stayed still. That silence felt worse than the messages. It hinted that he might have realized he was cornered. We stepped outside to wait for the driver who would take us back toward Panama City. The air carried a steady hum from traffic along the main road. Marisol scrolled through her notes, double-checking what we had already sent. Halfway through her list, her phone vibrated. She turned the screen toward me. "It's Ramos." She answered, and his voice came through brisk, almost winded. "We have him. Your subject was detained near the highway leading to Tocumen Airport. He was carrying a falsified passport and a large amount of U.S. cash. Local authorities are processing him now." The words took a moment to register. "He was running," I said. "Most likely," Ramos replied. "We will need the original audio file, all screenshots, and the forged documents. Once we organize everything, we'll move forward with extradition protocols." After the call ended, Marisol lowered her hand and let out a breath. "That's it. He's in custody." No part of me felt triumph. Relief came in small pieces, followed by something heavier, an understanding that the version of him I once defended no longer existed. The man arrested on that highway had nothing in common with the son I remembered. Our driver arrived and we loaded our bags. The ride back toward the capital passed with little conversation. Each mile added distance between us and Coronado, but the weight of what had happened stayed lodged in my chest. About an hour into the drive, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. The preview alone made my stomach knot. "Dad, please answer. They don't understand. I need your help." Another followed before I could open the first. "You know, I didn't have a choice. You know I'm not a bad person." Then a third, "I'm begging you. Don't let them treat me like a criminal." Marisol glanced over when I exhaled sharply. "He's contacting you from detention," she said, trying to shift blame again. "That pattern never changes." I stopped reading. Leaving the messages unopened felt like the only boundary I could still control. The urge to respond out of habit, out of old hope, rose and fell quickly. Logic no longer left room for anything sentimental. When we reached Panama City, I emailed every file Ramos requested. The audio recording, the photos, the paperwork from Wells Fargo, the threats. Mark responded within minutes, asking for permission to submit everything to the case file on the U.S. side. "Do it," I wrote back. From that point, our role shifted. The investigation no longer depended on us. We booked 2 seats on a flight to Miami scheduled for the next morning. Marisol insisted we get some rest before the hearing, though rest felt impossible. The flight took barely 3 hours. Miami's airport pulsed with activity, moving us along whether we liked it or not. Federal transport officers met us near the security checkpoint and guided us to a restricted area near the courthouse. They thanked us for cooperating, then directed us to the gallery. Dylan entered shortly after, escorted by 2 guards. His wrists were cuffed. His hair was disheveled, and his expression swung between anger and pleading as he scanned the room. When his eyes landed on me, something sharp flickered disbelief, then resentment. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but the officers kept him moving. He looked smaller, less certain. Not humbled, just exposed. The judge reviewed the evidence quickly. The recording from the bar, the bank documents, the forged passports, the confirmation of false death reports. Each point tightened the net around him. When the prosecutor finished, the judge issued the ruling without hesitation. Dylan Hale will be transferred to the custody of federal authorities in Colorado, pending further proceedings. He tried to interrupt. "This is wrong. He set me up. I didn't." But the guards pulled him back before his words turned into another tirade. Marisol rested a hand briefly on my arm. "Denver will handle the rest." Leaving the courtroom felt surreal. The heat outside hit us first, then the noise of traffic. Nothing about the world reflected what had just occurred. We boarded another flight this time, bound for home. Neither of us spoke much. Everything that needed saying had been said weeks ago. After landing, she called a ride share, and we parted ways with a short nod. I drove myself to the federal building downtown. The courthouse stood firm against the skyline, unchanged by the chaos that had unfolded because of my son's actions. I walked toward the entrance, the folder of evidence tucked under my arm again, preparing to take my seat for what would come next. Federal court in Denver carried a measured rhythm. Attorneys shifting papers, clerks checking files, the judge observing every detail with steady attention. Dylan sat at the defense table wearing a county-issued uniform, his shoulders pulled inward, as if shrinking from the room itself. He avoided looking at me. Maybe that was intentional, or maybe shame finally traced its way to the surface. Hard to tell anymore. The prosecutor opened with a clean sequence of facts: forged documents, fraudulent loans, property transfers tied to shell accounts, a death certificate filed under false pretenses, and the financial damage pinned to my name. Each point emerged without embellishment. Evidence spoke clearly enough. Screens displayed signatures copied from old tax forms. Bank officers testified that Dylan used aliases at multiple institutions. Officers from Panama explained his arrest and the false passport he carried. His attorney attempted a counter-narrative painting, Dylan as a young man crushed under debt and manipulation. He panicked, the lawyer said. He believed disappearing was the only way to protect himself. His action stemmed from desperation, not malice. Then Dylan stood up. His voice trembled, though the tone shifted between apology and blame. "I didn't mean for things to go this far," he said. "I was under pressure. People threatened me. Dad never understood how hard things were for me growing up." A few jurors exchanged glances. The mention of childhood wounds felt rehearsed, as if pulled from a script designed to spark sympathy. The prosecutor countered sharply. "Whatever difficulties he faced do not excuse staging a death-forging federal documents or placing over $1 million in fraudulent debt on Mr. Hale. Being overwhelmed does not legalize deception." Dylan's eyes bounced between the judge, the jury, and the floor. His story kept shifting: victim of business partners, victim of circumstance, victim of parental expectations. None of it matched the documents or the timeline. No tears came. No true remorse. Just a man trying to outrun consequences he'd engineered. The judge asked whether he had anything final to say before sentencing. He hesitated, then offered a sentence that drifted toward martyrdom. I did what I had to do. Nobody helped me. That was it. No apology to me. No acknowledgement of the damage. The judge delivered the sentence with steady resolve. 12 years in federal custody followed by mandatory restitution. Given the financial harm, the court orders repayment totaling $4.6 million to affected parties, including Mr. Hale. A murmur ran across the courtroom. Dylan's posture collapsed further, but not from guilt, more from disbelief that his story hadn't saved him. His attorney placed a hand on his arm. Dylan shook it off. Proceedings wrapped quickly after that. I signed several forms confirming receipt of court notices, answered a few procedural questions, and stepped aside while marshals prepared to transfer him to a holding area. He looked at me once as they led him out. The expression carried frustration, not regret. Something close to resentment flickered there, as if he still believed I'd betrayed him, not the other way around. The doors closed behind him. Whatever connection existed between us had already snapped long before the sentence was read. This was only the legal acknowledgement of a break that had begun years earlier. After the hearing, my life narrowed down to logistics: closing the townhouse, signing the lease for a modest apartment in Lakewood, moving boxes with the help of a neighbor who didn't ask questions. The new place felt small but manageable, a space without memories tied to Dylan's downfall. Simplicity offered something I hadn't felt in months: ease. Days found their rhythm. Work resumed. Weekends shifted toward community service projects in Jefferson County, then eventually toward something more focused: a small group for victims of financial abuse. People came with stories that ranged from deceptive spouses to adult children draining accounts. Their voices carried shades of my own experience. I didn't lead as a lecturer. I sat among them, sharing what happened only when necessary. A man in his 70s told the group a cracked foundation can't be ignored. It always shows in the structure sooner or later. That line stayed with me, honest, grounded, painfully true. Marisol visited occasionally. She'd drop off tamales from her sister's shop or update me on cases she was working. We talked about Dylan only when new paperwork surfaced, which became less frequent as his file transitioned into long-term processing. Whatever bond formed in Panama didn't shift into romance. We simply understood each other, two adults who'd walked through a storm someone else created. She would stay for 30 minutes or an hour, then excuse herself with a simple nod. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy, just presence, which was its own kind of comfort. I never called the prison, never asked for visitation rights, never wrote a letter. His silence met mine, and that became the only exchange that made sense. Some distances protect more than they wound. One evening, while sorting attendance sheets for the support group, my phone rang. A hesitant voice greeted me. "Mr. Hale. My sister gave me your number. She said you might understand what I'm dealing with." I reached for my notebook. "Tell me what's going on." The caller described a situation with a relative forging checks, manipulating accounts, leaving her unsure where to turn. Her words rushed out, fear, anger, confusion, all tangled together. "I don't know what to do," she said. I opened the notebook to a blank page pen poised. "Start from the beginning," I said, ready to take notes as she talked, already preparing the next steps without looking back.